Welcome, students, to our second section of notes on Greece, Birth of the West. If you're looking for the Day 1, 5.2, Athens and Sparta, that is the other section of notes. This is 5.3, Philosophy. So make sure to title this Greece, Birth of the West, and this is the Philosophy section of your notes. The question that I asked was, do you think it is more important to be right or to keep your friends? This is a philosophical type question that they would have asked. You don't need to write this down, but that type of question would be what they would have asked. As you see right here, this painting is from the Renaissance. It is the School of Athens, and this masterpiece really pays tribute to the different types of philosophers, whether it's scientific, mathematical, or whether it's ethical philosophers, political philosophers, a lot of different types there. Rise of great philosophers. You don't need to write this down, it's italicized, but after the Persian Wars, thinkers emerged who are called lovers of wisdom. This is the form from the Greek words phileo, which is to love, and sophia, which is wisdom. I would like you to write this down. Philosophers believe that the universe is subject to absolute and unchanging laws, so that there is a sense of truth that is absolute, and therefore, since there's an absolute truth, it can be known. And so these philosophers, they believed that truth is very absolute, that it's not abstract like a lot of philosophers believe today, but the philosophers of the Greeks believed that there are unchanging laws. People could understand these laws through logic and reason, and so the philosophers will develop a lot of logical reasoning skills that we will use today in logic, in understanding that truth is absolute and that it can be learned. Make sure you write those last two bullet points there. When we look at specific philosophers, Socrates is probably the most famous. He believes in questioning and teaches through the method of questioning. That's why we use the Socratic method when we look at primary documents and secondary documents, and we have our discussion. The teacher is the one to ask questions, and the students are to answer. When the students are done answering a question, the teacher simply asks another question and then compounds that question with another question. So much so that the students arrive to the understanding of the teacher through the method of questioning. Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living. So he was all into reason and logic and understanding. Now, this quote is interesting and worth merit. However, I would say that the gospel in the Bible says that life is transcendent because God created it. And so simply asking questions is not what brings you dignity in life. However, it is good to ask questions, and even God desires questions to be asked. The psalmist in many of the Psalms is asking questions. Asaph as well in Psalm 73, and also Isaiah in Isaiah 1 is asking questions. And God says, come now, let us reason together. So the Socratic method is using questions. In the School of Athens, the center of the picture is Plato and Aristotle. Plato. He is a student of Socrates, though you don't need to write that down. He writes The Republic, about an ideal society ruled by a philosopher king. And so in Athens, remember that democracy is key, and so it's people electing laws and leaders through the vote of the people. However, Plato did not believe that was just. He believed that led to injustice, and so he developed the idea of a philosopher king, that we need to have a ruler or a president or a king, not based on the ideas and whims of the people and what's popular, but we need to have a ruler that's based on logic and truth, somebody who loves wisdom. His writings would dominate European philosophy for about 1,500 years. It's not until the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, the American Revolution, that we start to question this type of idea. And that leads to the politicizing of politics as we see today, where it's all about popularity and rhetoric and speeches and looking good instead of about wisdom. Aristotle, he was the student of Plato. He uses rules of logic for argument. And so again, because truth can be learned through logic because truth is logical, he develops these rules. And this is known as the scientific method, which we still use today. Very important to write down, Aristotle, scientific method. You don't need to write this down, but he was actually a tutor of the 13-year-old prince who becomes Alexander the Great. And so Alexander the Great would become important and successful as a result of Aristotle's teaching. It's not just about winning wars, but it's about maintaining that land that you've conquered, being able to be a philosopher, a politician, so to speak. What's interesting about these philosophers is that we also see them in the book of Acts. Specifically, Acts 17, Paul engages with the philosophers of Athens and uses logic, but many of them merely like to debate and not simply love truth itself. So these philosophers, though they are lovers of wisdom, really they become lovers of debate because it's more of the ego that is developed from debating versus just simply the truth itself. And we see that today with debates. The Sophists, you should write down, they claimed they could find the answer to all questions. So word means the wisest, so they were proud of their supposed philosophical knowledge. They used rhetoric to win arguments. They often charged fees for teaching their skills and for arguing for others. They might be considered as a type of lawyer today. Sophist philosophers, Protagoras, even questioned the existence of the Greek gods. Socrates had questioned things as well, and that led to his death, where he, through the democratic process, was voted to die. And that's the problem with democracy, that it can vote off people to die. And Protagoras also was somebody who questioned a lot of things. So Sophists, they claimed they could find the answers to all questions. So that's the end of the notes. Thank you very much for taking these.